welcome to all of you for attending this webinar on ensuring proper financial control and oversight. This is part of our Leadership Excellence webinar series, and my name is Spencer Brigham. I am the Training and Events Administrator for AFOA Canada. So welcome to this webinar, and I would like to just say a short land acknowledgement to start. So welcome everyone, and thank you for being here. I would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the First Nations. This land continues to be home to diverse Indigenous peoples, whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors of our society. We honor the traditional lands and homelands of Indigenous peoples and communities across Canada, including First Nations, Inuit, and Métis living both on and off reserve in rural and urban communities. And just a bit about myself, I am Ojibwe, and I'm from Walpole Island First Nation, also known as Bakaadranung, unceded territory in Ontario. And without any further ado, I'll hand it over to Joanne, your facilitator for this webinar.
Hi, everyone. I'm not sure what time zone you're in, so it might be good morning and it might be good afternoon. So to both, I'm new with the webinars, so that is why I let everybody in before it was time, just to let you know. So my name is Joanne Contant, and I have over 25 years of experience working with First Nations as a CPA as well as a CAFM. I am originally from North Bay, Ontario, a Métis, and I am currently part-time CFO and HR at Wata Mohawks, and I'm also a facilitator with the AFOA. So these webinars, we have 3 in a row. Hopefully you're registered in all 3, and if you are, they flow in together. I want to be able to answer questions, so I'm leaving some time at the end for you to answer questions, but I also invite you to ask questions as we go. I am not going to watch the chat, so Spencer will probably let me know if there's a question in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and ask. I'm good with that, and I'm going to have to balance the time, so sometimes we get carried with good discussions, but it might fall into my time frame, so we'll play it by ear, but I'm assuming we're going to have time for questions. I will also ask just general question to you, and I want you to just answer them in chat so we kind of get a feeling for things. And the other thing I want to tell you is someone asked about the PowerPoints. These will be sent to you after the session, so probably the end of the day or tomorrow. So I am also working with two cameras, but I only have one on and 2 monitors. So I hope as I share this screen with you, it works out. I get confused sometimes. So Spencer, just let me know if you don't see the first page of the slide.
Okay, so we can see the slides, but you're not sharing in the full screen.
Oh, shoot. Why is this so complicated for me? I tried earlier and it worked. I'm going to try this one more time. Something about showing the screen too. This should work. This should work.
Yep, perfect.
Good. It worked a while ago. The minute you get an audience, participants online, then nothing works. That's how it goes. So today we're talking about financial oversight and internal controls. So in this webinar, we're looking at the governance, basic governance, and how obviously it pertains to finance. We're going to talk a bit about finance and audit committee, what it is, what their role is. We're also going to talk about financial controls, the importance of financial controls. We will also look at financial administrative law, and then we'll do a wrap up. And again, Spencer, if this is not going to the next slide, you're going to have to let me know.
It's working so far. Yep.
Thank you. All right, so let's talk governance, the basics in relation to what we're here for, which is finance. So First Nations governance means establishing rules to coordinate our actions and achieve our goals. So this was taken from the Governance Toolkit, a guide to nation building by Jody Wilson-Raybould and Tim Raybould. Financial governance is the process of how an organization manages decision-making. Governance describes who has the power, who makes the decisions, how others make their voice heard, and what goes into the reports and financial statements. And that definition comes from the First Nation Financial Management Board. So today, as we're looking at this is the finance part is a very important part of governance, but there are many, everyone is responsible for it in some manner. Oops. The governance system. So when you have a governance system, you have to ensure, and the first two bullets speak to this, that your chief and council, or if you're in an organization now, your board of directors, that they are separate from the administration, that there's a clear line between the roles of council and the roles of administration. So you need different people to run that. And I've worked in First Nations where many of the counselors were also employees. So in one instance, one of the counselor was public works manager. So that has happened. I've seen it in First Nation, but ideally you want that separated. They each have different roles and you don't want to mix that, because the real purpose of council is to determine allocations of scarce resources to the most effective use. So that is the big challenge of the scarce resources and how to use them the most effectively. And then it's also their role is to establish strategies and objectives for the operating system. So they develop a strategy, they have their objectives that they've compiled from the information that they've done with community consultation, and their role is like the big picture, and administration's role is to deliver the services and programs to fulfill that strategic plan. So their role is really to provide direction through the administrator, or different First Nations have different names. Sometimes it's a band manager, administrator, senior administrator, CAO, whatever that person's name is. And if it's a board, it would be the executive director. They take what council want to do, and they ensure that staff, they relay the information to staff so that they can deliver those programs and resources, and also ensure that they are meeting the expectations. So in your chat, if you want, and this is where now I get confused for me to see, but in your chat, if you want to put what you see as disadvantages when council and administration are together, that there's no clear divide. And are we getting any anything in the chat?
So no messages yet.
Okay.
Um,
Does anyone see disadvantages or advantages of council and administration working basically together in the sense of there's no clear point who does what? So there's
okay, so
disadvantages.
Lori's
Sorry,
strength.
I got it now, Spencer.
Okay, okay.
Disadvantages, confusion over limits and roles and responsibility. Oh, hi, Catherine. Yes, the two people that answered, I know personally. That's nice to see you. Am I still on?
Joanne, I think we lost your video there, Joanne.
Oops. Am I back on?
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. So, and then I have another one, many issues with conflict of interest. So it's really important to have those roles very separate. And we're going to return to the slides which answer how we can do this. So now I'm not going to use my my other presentation because it's going to confuse everybody. There we go.
Just a note, there's 2 more comments here. Catherine says approving their own work. And Jamie Lee says would need approval from council to, I would assume.
Thanks. So it's very important to keep those separate because of conflict of interest.
Joanne, on your presentation, we're seeing the presenter view, not the full slide.
Oh, Lord. Okay. Obviously, I can't manage too much technology today, so I am going to solve this. Do you see my slide now?
Yep, we're good.
Clearly, I can't work with 2 monitors. Simple as that. So it's important that we keep those 2 separate. So moving to my next slide here, let's look at the roles of council or if it's a board. So we have the community, we have funders, we have members. And when we're looking at communities, First Nations, we're looking at doing a comprehensive plan, looking at doing some providing opportunities for the community to let us know what they want, what services they're looking for, programs and so forth. We also have to look at the funders as well. What are the expectation in that agreement? And again, that sometimes is based on very specific things. So how do we work the agreement objectives with our needs? So it's to marry those together. And if you're an organization, depending on what your members are, again, to ensure that you're providing the programs and services that they need. And who's doing all that? It's management, staff, and volunteers. But where did they get this information is either if it's a council or a board of directors, from community engagement, they get to know what the services are that people are looking for, programs, so forth. And they put that into a plan and then a strategic plan, and that's at council level. And financially, they're looking at the big picture. And then they bring that information down to the whatever your senior administrator or whatever the title is, your top dog, to bring that information down to management of what the expectations are, what outcomes we're looking for, what programs and services to deliver. And as you can see in this file, in the slide, the direction is it came from the people and it moves to the council, and then they have management and staff do the actual work. So it's very important that council and management are separate. Council just looks at the big pictures, but then management and staff do all the details. So they'll break down, you know, if seniors is your top priority and specifics about seniors, maybe more home support, that sort of thing, then it's broken down to management so that management can come up with different options on programming and services and then deliver that. So then they are reporting to council, who then reports to the community. So it's a circle of, it started with the community, it went to council, it's delivered by management and staff. And then we, management staff, report to council on the financially and other data like statistics on what we have done. And then council can do annual and quarterly or monthly reports to show community what they have done, what they have accomplished. So in order to do their job, this is what council's, basically their financial responsibilities are, the big picture. So they are accountable or responsible at the end of the day. Like legal obligations, at the end of the day, they're signing the agreements. It sits on them. If you're sitting on a board, for example, and this applies to council as well, but if payroll submissions for, benefits, the mandatory benefits like CPP, EI are not remitted, that sits on the shoulders of council. So legally, they have a lot of responsibility, and they also have responsibility internally to their membership. So for financial responsibilities, their main one is to establish plans, objectives, and goals, to have a vision on where we're going. In order to do that, they have to determine this through the help of the community, but then they have to look at, which is the second point here, the budget and the resources. So we want to do this, but how much money do we have? What resources do we have? And they are responsible for approving the budget. They're not responsible of doing or preparing budgets. They see the budget and they approve it. That's their role. And they have to ensure that it is meeting the strategic plan and also the funding agreements. Also, they need to ensure that the finance function is adequately staffed. So most of us, I'd say 100% of us, do not get enough funding in band support. And band support also covers your finance people. And so you don't have the resources to hire perhaps as many as you may need. And you also have to ensure that there's capacity building there. So through the AFOA, through various organizations, you can get the capacity information training that you need. So you need to have a good foundation in your finance department. Their other financial responsibility of council is to demonstrate transparency to the community. So they do that with reporting, with sharing policies, with letting them know what they're doing and keeping them informed. They also, because they are the signers of the financial agreements, they also need to know that there's financial reporting outside, externally, as well as internally. Internally to management, and then internally in the sense of to the community. So some First Nations report more frequently to their communities, and others it's just annual or per project. They also need to look at it, ensure that there's internal financial report going on, because that is how we make our decisions. That is how we are dealing with the short term. So you need adequate information on a timely basis so you can make decisions and change when it's needed. The other one is to make sure that there's adequate internal controls. Not their job to do internal controls per se, but to ensure that there is internal controls in place. And then obviously to ensure long-term financial stability. So one way of doing that is to have a finance and audit committee. So this depends on, in my experience, on the size of the First Nation, because some may have a finance committee and an audit committee. Most of them have one that has both, and some have none. So you may have one where you are, and then you may not. But what is the role, and why you should think of having one perhaps, is they're the ones that are kind of overseeing everything before it goes to council. They're kind of like the buffer. So what they're looking at is the financial planning. So they're responsible at looking at, let's say we need to get a loan. You're going into a project and you need to get a loan or purchase large equipment. That's their job to go and get, information and work with the finance department to have options to present to council. They also review financial reporting. It could be monthly, it could be quarterly. And again, they make recommendations to council. They also are part of the audit process. If they need to identify who the auditor will be every year, they may suggest that you put an RFP for a new auditor, so they would take care of that. They may even meet with the auditor to go over audits. And then they also look at control of risk management. And here we're talking about making sure internal controls, policies, everything are in place to minimize risk. So their role is kind of to go through the material and make recommendations to council and perhaps be the liaison between council and the finance department. So if you have one or want to create one, your committee structure it's created by council and has to be supported by council. You need some terms of reference, so it's very clear what the roles are. Also need to probably do a BCR, or if you're some people, some First Nation call them MCRs, but you need some sort of resolution to name these members. You need a code of conduct, you need conflict of interest. So you need proper policies in place to ensure that this structure is well run from day one. And one of the points there that's really important, committees do not assume council responsibility. They review and recommend. So that they don't have power per se. They're kind of doing a lot of the vetting of the information before it hits council. So what's the composition? Well, these positions will be appointed by council. Your members, you need a minimum of 3. Usually you will have, you should have for sure, a counselor on the committee, probably a member, someone external. You may have a finance person, and depending how big you are, it could be a little more people. And what's important here is that you get a good balance, you're not looking for experts. You want someone in the group to be an expert, but you want a good balance, and you want this like transparent. So again, how you choose these people has to be a transparent process. And you want to make sure that they're independent. So this is one way of doing that. And often First Nations counselors have portfolios. So obviously the finance portfolio holder would sit in this committee. So financial controls, these are very, very important. They prevent, detect, and mitigate risk. They're important, and they need to be in place. So why are they so important? They increase the assurance and reduce your compliance costs through a check and balance system. For me personally, it reduces errors, potential risk. It reduces the audit risk as well. So the auditor assesses your policies and your internal controls as they're doing their audit. And that will determine how, the stronger your internal controls, the less checking they need to do, the less they have to they have more confidence in the processes. So to me, it's very important that we have that. They also
We have a
increase
question here in the
management.
chat from
Sure.
Anant. Asks, ideal size of F&A team.
To be honest, I think it's a matter of how big you are. I mean, minimum 3, 5 might be good, and you don't want it to go too big because now it becomes too complicated. So if you're small, I'd say 3. If not bigger, 5. And then I'm looking at the chat. Would need approval. Oh, okay. I think that was it, right, on the chat.
Yeah, that was the only one. The other ones were from before.
Yeah, so it depends on the size. And then some First Nations are so small, they just have the counselor that has the finance portfolio kind of just works with the finance department and brings the information to council. So decision makers make their decisions on financial information. I mean, it's pretty rare that there's no money involved in any decisions that we make. And when we have to make decision, we need some, if we're looking at any kind of financial information, we need that assurance that we're looking at the latest numbers and that they were collected accurately. So this is where internal controls come into play. So they're required, and we're going to look at some examples. They're required to ensure that you're making the best informed decisions. Management's responsibilities for internal control. So council has to ensure that they are in place, but it's not their job to actually do them. Management is responsible for internal control. So in my position, I am responsible for that, but every manager is in some way or another. So what we're looking at is why it's so important is to provide reliable accounting and operating information, because we all make our decisions based on our budgets, and the numbers have to be there. An example I've seen where we've opened an account, we didn't open the account properly, and those numbers didn't go to the financial statements. So now my financial statements aren't really balanced. So we have processes in place to make sure that that doesn't happen. The other thing is why it's important is safeguarding assets and records. So again, that's just not the obvious of making sure your cash is locked in, but all assets, everything the First Nation owns, just even the maintenance of it. And anyone that's in this webinar that was in the accounting one that I did a couple of weeks ago, part of these sessions, we talked about a gravel pit. And again, if you don't have proper record keeping and a gate to this, I'm checking the chat line here, then you don't want things to just walk off. So Catherine is saying, keep in mind, too small may hinder getting quorum for a meeting, and too large could have scheduling issues. Thanks, Catherine. She's so right. You can't go too small, and you can't too much. Again, scheduling, that's usually an issue on so many things. Another thing is internal controls promote operational efficiency and effectiveness. So an example of that is just looking at who's doing what, and if we can find a way to make the system more efficient. So I might have one employee updating a website and posting events. And then I might have another employee who's doing like newsletters and emails. that is not efficient. So part of our internal controls make sure we're not doubling on information or we're not omitting. So that in that situation, you would put both tasks with the same person so that you're not creating errors and duplication and so forth. You also need internal controls for compliance with law and regulation and to prevent and detect errors, fraud, or illegal acts. And for me, the biggest thing is detect error. So I have one staff that enters information, the other one checks it. For payroll, I have one person inputting the payroll that's been approved by her manager. Then I see the payroll and I input the payroll by department so that people can't see who makes what. And then I give it to another person. So certain jobs get seen by so many people that if there's an error, it gets caught immediately and fixed right there. So if you have a committee, they're responsible. One of the things is for the financial controls. If you don't, then it's in my situation, it sits on my shoulders. If you have a committee, they're also looking at it. So they're looking at reviewing and making recommendation and make sure that the policies are capturing this. So internal controls and policies go hand in hand. So you need both of them to support each other. They identify and assess financial risk. They obtain management's confirmation for compliance to statutory requirements, and they obtain independent assurance, and that is through the audit itself. So they're not decision makers. They're only vetting information and making recommendations. So samples of financial controls, an example that you're all probably familiar with is delegation of signing and approval authority. So every First Nations I've worked with, we have some sort of limit on how much you can spend before you need another signature. If you're looking at checks, you have 2 people that sign and you have to have all the paperwork behind to support that check. Your signing people are not the same people that would produce the checks. So in where I work, I can't sign checks and the accounts payable person can't sign checks. It is counsel, and my boss is another person that could sign if we're missing someone for a signature. So you have to make sure that you're separating those duties. You want to document financial and administration policies, and we'll be talking about that in this session, and it falls through in the next webinars. Also, IT access and security policy. You need to have tight policies, especially since the pandemic. The fraud attempts have increased. They're so good. I mean, I've seen it come in my system. I did not fall for it, but it was so well done that it was almost like impressive. So you need passwords. You need continuing capacity building on that. We have a company that sends us these videos that we have to watch, and there's a little quiz at the end to keep us informed of the ways that people can steal your information. Bank reconciliation, another important thing that has to be done monthly so that if there are errors, they're detected immediately. If there was fraud, that's detected immediately. Also, we in our situation, and again, it depends how big your organization is, different people see the bank reconciliation and deal with it. So the more eyes on it, the less likelihood of fraud. And when errors are made, because we all make errors, they're caught that month, not 2 months later. Audited financial statements, again, at year end, that's done with the audit. Very important. Interim financial statements. Your council or your board should see And again, depends on the organization. Some like it quarterly, others it's monthly. Should at least see quarterly statements, because it's a red. You can find red flags. You can identify issues. You can change course of what you had planned and how now you may not be able to. How to change that. We do this monthly. My managers look at their financial statements monthly. We're looking for a couple of things. They make errors on coding, we make errors on coding or inputting. So if there's errors, to be caught immediately that month and not at year end. To look at your budget. Where are you? Are you getting to overspending? Are you underspending? Are you providing the services and programs you said you would do in your program planning? So financial statements really are the key tool on a monthly basis to assess if we're doing what we said we'd be doing. Segregation.
So we have a comment here from Shirley Kelly. Asks, what role and limits do counselor with portfolios, i.e., education, public works, major projects, etc.?
Well, I can answer for finance because I'm a finance person, but I mean, again, with portfolios, it's limited. In my view, having a portfolio is more of gathering information to bring to council and to be up on what's going on, the little details, instead of council being told all the time. So whether it's education or public works or any major project, instead of bombarding council, because remember, we want a nice clear line between administration and council. So we can't bombard them with all the details. So the counselor could be getting all the details and just bring to the table the big ideas, the big issues, the big opportunities to the table. Again, that person needs to be clear again on their roles, and that should be all in terms of reference and supported with policies, council policies. Shirley, does that answer your question? Or you can let me know. Oh, okay, thanks. So if I had a counselor that had the financial portfolio, I would not expect him to be in my business and get into the details, because he'd be crossing that line. It would be more for me to give him information that I don't need to always be bugging council about, and he could present it. So there again, there's that line that they need to observe. Segregation of duties, again, you probably have this with cash. You know, you want your receptionist maybe to accept the cash, and someone else double checks the amount, and someone else brings it to the bank. So the more you segregate, the less likelihood of fraud, and if there's errors, it's caught immediately. And then finally, codes of conduct and ethics, very important to have in place, because that supports financial control and moral ethics in a sense, and people's responsibilities. So here are some questions that you can ask whether it's audit or finance committee can ask. Or things that they can look at. So does the finance team have the finance staff have the qualification, training, or experience? And if not, it's a matter of identifying that to get some capacity building, to get some training. Is there sufficient staff? Again, we've talked that we're usually underspent in that area. Are reports required by funding agreements submitted on time? Very important, because not now, but ISC usually would hold back any funding if reports were behind or late. Look at risks. look at segregation of duties, making sure policies are in place for processes and understood. How are travel and other discretionary expenses reviewed and approved? Again, and that's a control, something to control. Looking at signing authorities, and the list goes on. So there's a lot of things that they are responsible for. They're not the decision maker, but these are the things they're looking for to ensure that the internal controls are strong. And how can we get this, supported? And I always say the policies are, they're required with internal controls, and policies are nice, but even nicer is the financial administration law. So what is this? It's a set of finance and governance practices that helps councils and staff to make informed decisions and run their nation well. A nation that operates by its FAL commits to good governance and finance practices over a long term. So this is, it prevents staff from doing kind of their own thing in council, and then a new council comes in and then things get changed around. So what it's doing, it's committing the First Nation to this administration law, and it will continue. And it's not something that's done overnight. So there's a lot of thought and work that goes into this. And then if there are changes in staff or council, that this structure is still upheld. So the importance, it makes governance easier. It also makes you more stable and strengthen the members' confidence in how it's run. So again, transparency, you're letting a First Nation, your members know that you're working on this. Like I said, it takes a while to do. And then once it's in place, that gives the membership more confidence. And another thing about that I wanted to mention, that I'm looking in my notes, it makes applying for some funding and even going in the 10-year agreement easier, because if you want to do the 10-year agreement with ISC, Indigenous Services Canada, you need a finance and administration law. So it's an advantage, maybe even with creditors, other funders. So what is this? It's the roles and responsibilities. So it really speaks of the expectations of council, the expectations and roles and responsibility of finance and audit committee officers and employees. So it addresses everybody on what their roles and responsibilities are. And their responsibility is, the responsibilities is broken into several categories. We actually have a pro in our group today, Catherine. It looks at administration, and it identifies their roles and responsibilities. It looks at financial management, and it looks at how you're going to plan, how you're going to budget, how you're going to assess risk, the rules for borrowing money, loans, looks at internal controls, reporting. So all that's identified in that section. It will also deal with tangible capital assets, reporting breaches, and there's other sections that can be covered, like capital projects, how those will take place, what the process is, responsibilities. And then you might have miscellaneous. So some First Nation may have oil or gas or land management. So it's going to address how the revenues and processes take place. I'm just checking my chat. Trevor, what if the present council and men don't want to implement a financial committee? Good question. I see that a lot. I'm going to ask Catherine actually, who's, if she's can hear me. She works more with that end, and I'm asking her because she probably has actually dealt with that people, councils that are not keen on adopting an administration law.
Okay, so I will give Catherine the opportunity to talk here. So, Catherine, I just gave you the option to unmute there if you would like to speak.
Oh my goodness, put me in the spot. I was just about to type an answer. That's okay. I was sharing in the chat that you explained that like a pro, Joanne. And as I was typing, I kind of heard the question. So, am I right in that it was asking what if a council is
Or
not?
the admin doesn't want to implement a financial audit committee.
Oh, a finance and audit committee. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, it's kind of, I mean, that is a decision made at council, and I'm hoping with the involvement and informing membership of what the whole foundational tenets of implementing a financial administration law. And you explained it really quite well in that one statement around it's for the long-term, sustainable, best practices, implementing those within administration-wide, including responsibilities for council. So making sure that there's good financial management practices implemented on the long term, and that's really council's decision to make, and embracing administration because it may require some change if they've never had a risk analysis, or they've never had multi-year financial planning, or the different types of concepts included in a financial administration law. So certainly there's lots of communication, engagement, understanding, and growing into living up to whatever the financial administration law is stating as commitments. So I hope that helps.
Thanks. You know what, Catherine, I read that quickly and I want you to stand by because you're still working with financial administrative law, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I'm with the FMB. Yeah.
Right. So I wouldn't mind you, I know there's other questions, but what happens if you are approached by someone from a community that wants to do the financial law,
Mhm.
but there's resistance? I'm sure that's common. Any words of advice?
Yeah, certainly. And you know what, it is a best practice for community wide. So there's membership involvement, council clarity on what this means, and administration wide what this can mean. I mean, uh, if you think about the vision for the community and what that means in setting a strong financial position and getting to the point where we're managing wealth. I mean, this may be the pathway to wealth management. This may be the pathway of creating those things that community would love to see happen for the membership wide. So, there's so much going on in terms of resource development and other major projects, and First Nations want to be involved in those things. So, but if we're not, just getting ready for all of that in terms of really understanding and minding our own internal practices and strengthening those, that's the longer term vision. So a lot of communication, lots of engagement. What is it? What does it mean to opt into the Fiscal Management Act? What does it mean for all of these different things? So absolutely, I see the chat pop up, and change management workshop is the very first one we start with, and with lots of clarity with council around what does a FAL lay out as council's commitments to supporting that FAL. So let's, and there is that transparency and accountability interwoven throughout the financial administration law. But anyways, I could talk all day about it because I just love it. So I got to stop myself. You're doing great, Joanne. I'm just gonna sit back and listen.
Thank you so much. Sorry for putting you on the spot, but I mean, I'm the accountant. I crunch numbers, but this topic, we had a specialist online, so I had to share.
You're sweet. Thank you.
So Jamie Lee says, would committees be ideal for those portfolio holders to help with specific tasks to lighten workload for council and also have transparency? And you're right. I think that, like I said, instead of bombarding council with all these details that they don't really need to know, having that portfolio holder is kind of your little buffer before it hits and they have a sense of what goes to council table agenda and what doesn't. So yeah, definitely. And for transparency, definitely. So I'm just gonna go to my next slide so I have time for questions. So to have support on that, you have the First Nation Financial Management Board. You have, like I said, it's not an overnight thing, and I didn't want to scare anyone. Why I'm saying that is a lot of thought is put into it and consultation. So to me, that's a positive. You know, it starts with council doing the change management, make sure everybody's on board administration wise as well, getting a resolution that's saying, okay, this is what we're going to do, pick a team that's going to do it, and then it's developed over time. And as I mentioned, it also, you know, if you want to do the 10-year agreement, or you want to do anything, as Catherine mentioned, I mean, when you have that, it's it's confidence. People have confidence in your abilities. So first summary, you want a finance and audit committee, again, if possible. And I mean, I've worked with very tiny First Nations, so sometimes it doesn't really make sense, but has an essential role by overseeing the financial performance of the organization. Financial reports must be available on a timely basis. Committee needs to ensure those performing finance duties are capable and have sufficient capacity. And again, that's one thing the AFOA does. The First Nation Financial Management Board has lots of tools on their website that and opportunities to learn and to yeah, free stuff on website, as well as if you contact them, then they can work with you. Committee needs to take leadership role in policies, not, you know, just on policies. And they also need that independent assurance by getting that audit. So I'm opening it up to questions. Anyone? Chat. Oops.
Okay, so it looks like we have a comment in there from Justin. It says, our FMB contacts have been more than eager to assist with implementing all components of the FAL/FAB. They really are a great resource.
Excellent. Any other questions, comments? If you're shy, put it in the chat. Lori says, couldn't find any mistakes. That's one of my bosses. That's a counselor from Wata Mohawks, and she likes to find my mistakes in my presentations. Internal joke. Any other comments, questions? I think if you are registered for the next one, it all kind of flows in as well. Anyone else? If not, thank you for joining.
We got one from Wayne here.
Yeah.
What timeline would the FAL take if starting?
I personally have not been in a First Nation where we have done this, so and that I was part of it. So can Catherine answer that one? Maybe I lost her.
Oh, here, I found my unmute button. Oh, I think I'm still muted. Or am I?
No, I hear
No,
you.
we can hear you. We
Perfect.
can hear
Oh,
you.
perfect. Thank you. So there's a couple of things, and then the process really, you are absolutely correct, Joanne. It is a process. It really starts with understanding what that FAL is and engaging community. It is a financial administration law, so some First Nation communities have that ratified in community meetings. So there's lots of informing and engaging and making sure that this is the pathway that the First Nation does want to take. And then it does take a little bit around documentation just to opt into the Fiscal Management Act, and FMB can help draft a financial administration law. From there, really, it's just like having the best practice. It always comes down to people. I mean, the solid practice, solid policy, solid procedures, but it's really in the implementation of that financial administration law, which comes down to people. So
Would you say like a year, 2 years?
I would, if I had to take a guess, a few months to actually enact one, and then maybe a good solid 12 to 18 months, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. I think if I can think of the shortest time frame, it might have been 4 months, and then but on average, I typically work with the First Nation engaged in this process about 2 years.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, and we have one final question here from Jill Cavell. Any advice or potential solutions for ensuring controls as organizations move towards paperless/digital processes?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're living it now with the pandemic. So much has changed. So I'm trying to catch up, but again, for example, when you sign we sign documents online and it stamps it the day and date. So there's some systems that I have confidence in, and some I'm iffy. So to be honest, it's a new world for me, and I'm not really sure. I know for like I've been worried about sending confidential information, and I put passwords and then I text the person what the password is. I don't put it in the email. So there's little ways, but it's like a new world now. So what's Lisa saying? So it's a heavy workload, Lise. Yeah, and commitment, definitely. But it's a process. So it's 1:58. We have 2 minutes. Lise, you saw Catherine's response. Yes, finance has definitely a big role. And that's one thing AFOA recognizes, especially through their CAFM, is we just don't crunch numbers. We can offer a lot more to help them make the informed decisions. So I'm going to assume I'm going to get cut off soon. So thank you for joining us. If you're in the next ones, that's great. You will be getting the PowerPoint. Spencer?
Yep. So thank you so much to you, Joanne. And yep, our webinar is coming to a close. So it's officially over. And if you're joining the next webinar, we'll see you shortly. And if not, you'll receive a follow-up email with the link to the recording, as well as a survey and the PowerPoints as well. So miigwech to everyone.